first of all, the majority of us were not raised or encouraged to listen to the heart brain and the gut brain, right? So the primary brain center that has become the center of reason and logic is the skull brain. And so meaning that we've given power to the skull brain, in particular, the left hemisphere, right, which is more of the reasoning, logistic, thinking, rationalizing brain center. And as a result of that, we have discredited any information that's coming from these intuitive or felt sense brain centers. And so we've developed habits, pathways, programs to respond to the information that we're receiving from those other centers in such a way that it discredits it or it distrusts it. And this is exactly what Ian McGilchrist wrote about when he wrote his master book, The Master and Its Emissary, I believe is the name of his book. And I've talked about this in the podcast, and I have links to it, but it's a substantial read. The premise of it is that we've handed the power over to our left hemisphere dominant rationalizing way of thinking and interpreting information. And we've let it dominate when in fact its whole purpose is to be in service to the more right hemisphere mode of being, which involves the heart center and the gut center. So we're backwards. Yeah. And so how it's almost like the polarity shift. Like, how do we shift the poles within ourselves where we can trust those quieter, more intuitive centers as leading, as dominating information, and then filter it through the rational brain center to take action, to find words, to move, orient in a certain way. That's what we're moving towards. Mm-hmm. That's what it means to trust in the process. So every time we get that hit and we get a sense, and then we override it, and then we're reaffirmed that had we listened, maybe that thing wouldn't have happened. Those are opportunities to basically rewire the pathway to be like, next time, I'm going to consciously override what my system wants to do, which is ignore the information or doubt it, or have certain parts come up that are louder, and these louder voices that don't, that are interrupting the listening. But what happens if I get a small intuitive hit in my gut or in my heart, and I choose to pay attention to it, regardless of what my so-called mind is saying in response to it? And that's going to feel so foreign to your embodied system. It will likely generate anxiety. It will generate doubt. It's not going to feel comfortable. And that's the whole, like, okay, if I'm going to reestablish, reorient how I'm listening internally, I'm going to have to do this thing that's counterintuitive now to the neuronal pathways that have already been built and established within my system. So to answer your question, yes, the mind does override, but the mind being the left mode center for kind of like primary mode of operating, overrides. And then in parts work, we could say there's certain parts that dominate that system. And so the goal is that we become metacognitive to all of that, which means we can pull ourselves out conscious. So meaning we can sit in the seat of awareness or consciousness And we can pay attention to all of this that's happening. We can pay attention to the thoughts. We can pay attention to the felt experience. We can pay attention to the emotions. We can pay attention to the body sensations. We can pay attention to how we're mobilized, the behaviors that we want to do. And we're sitting there observing it. That's the goal. How do we get there? That's where meditative practices come in, right? So meditative practices aren't just to reduce anxiety or stressful symptoms. We're working the mind center, we're working to establish a relationship to consciousness itself so we can become more aware, more aware, more aware, more aware. And then eventually we're just walking around where we're like, we're aware.
Right.
We're aware of these states all the time. And then just to close all of that up, that's why, you know, in what it is that we're kind of talking about here in this program, when we engage in exercises that expand our state of consciousness, so whether they're Joe Dispenza's meditations or meditations on Headspace or meditations on Waking Up app or meditation or entering into like plant ceremonial spaces or kirtan or going into altered states through dance or singing or yoga. Like there's so many different ways we can get into those altered states, but or breath work. But we're going into a non-ordinary state, meaning we're shifting the brainwave state into a slower frequency.
Mm-hmm.
When we're in a slower, coherent frequency, consciousness can get into the operating system and rewrite the program. We can't rewrite the program when we're in left mode operating ordinary beta brainwave frequency. So we can tell ourselves 1,001 times to think differently and it's not going to happen.
Right.
We can go into toxic positivity and live there and it's not going to change. The only thing that changes it is when we can actually get into the operating system through a non-ordinary state and not just get in, but actually embed in a new program.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how do we embed in that program? By generating the felt experience that we want to experience more of. And that's what we've been talking about, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not, I want $1 million, or I want the fancy car, or I want the perfect relationship. It's, I want to rest into my life feeling a particular way, which at the end of the day seems to be very similar for all of us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Right. If I step out of being anxious all the time, what am I going to experience more of? Rest, relief, openness, enjoyment. Right? I'm going to be able to enjoy my life more. Right? And what happens when I do that? Like, I open.
Mm-hmm.
I feel love. I feel gratitude. So we're seeking that. And so when we open into these altered states and we embed in that new felt experience, now what happens is we're generating it before it's even come to us. It's like that is what our system is programming itself to seek out. Instead of scanning for all of the painful, potentially traumatic experiences that keep us in survival stress.
Mm-hmm.
It's now scanning for the experiences that are going to help us feel this certain way. So in a way, we're hijacking the system.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, somebody like Dispenza's work, and there's others out there, Bruce Lipton, and I know there's others out there too that have been doing research on all of this. We now have data to support the truth behind what it is that we're doing here, the map. but nobody can do it for us. It's like we know it, we see the journey, we see the map, we know we have to walk over there, but for whatever reason, we might still just be at the starting line going, no, I'm not sure,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And that's where the gathering of information is so important, because eventually it's like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm taking my first step. I'm doing it. I'm committing to it. I'm going to start to actively engage in my life in this way and take charge of it,
Mhm.
because no pill, no person, not enough amount of money, right? Nothing is going to do it for us but us, you, me, individually.